Welcome back. So before, when we talked about the MDA framework, we talked about there being different kinds of fun. We also said each kind of fun might be fun for some people and not so fun for others. That implies that there aren't just different kinds of fun, but also different kinds of players. And I said we'd get back to that later. Here's where we're going to talk about players.
Our journey here starts with a game designer named Richard Bartle, who's best known for working on a game called Mod-10, which was basically the first step towards games that we call MMOs today. And what he observed in these early MUD games is that there were 4 general kinds of player behaviors, which we've referred to today as the Bartle taxonomy. Now let's be clear, this was not a scientific study, there was no research about this, it was literally just one guy's personal observations. At the same time, the guy in question had been doing these MMO-like experiences for longer than anyone, and other people in the space felt like this rang true, so we have a kind of collectively accepted this as maybe not absolute truth, but at least a pretty good starting point. The first type of player that Bartle identified he called the achiever. Achievers are the players who play to win. They're the first ones that if you show them something like Minecraft or The Sims, they say, okay, how do I win that? The achiever is the kind of player who will work hard to optimize their play so that they can do the most or the fastest or the best with what they've got. If you've ever seen the speedrunning community where people try to beat games as fast as possible and try to be faster than each other, those are achievers. Players who gravitate towards very difficult games like Souls-likes that they can show off that they beat it, also achievers. Now think of this in the context of MMOs. We're talking about open world games where there's no single end goal. Beating the game is not really the point, not even really possible. So you might wonder, okay, what are these kinds of people even doing playing games like that? But then you will see people doing difficult things in MMOs. You can have people that are coordinating difficult mass raids, or getting as many characters as possible to the level cap as quickly as possible, or entering in PvP arenas to compete with other players. Yeah, those people definitely play MMOs. And MMO design has evolved over time to accommodate them. The next type in Bartle's taxonomy was explorers. As the name suggests, these are the players who love to explore the world. If you know someone who loves to play Zelda games and actually make their own maps of the areas, or someone who writes game walkthroughs or contributes a lot to online game wikis, that's an explorer. These people are curious about games and how they work. So this doesn't just mean exploring in terms of traversing physical spaces. It can also be exploring what's possible mechanically within the game. So these are people who might figure out that you can jump slightly higher than normal if you're walking diagonally when you jump, or otherwise finding weird glitches like that, because they're always just looking to test the limits of what you can do in the game. And then, of course, if an achiever gets wind of some of these things, the achiever will then use that to improve their speedrun time or something. So there is some interaction between these types. The third type Bartle identified were socializers. These are the ones that come to MMOs to play with other people. Many mods and older MMOs even had what are called dedicated RP servers, short for role-playing, meaning that people playing on those servers were expected to be taking on a role and playing in character, and it was those player-player interactions to focus on. So imagine, for example, you're playing in an MMO and you're in the middle of a heated battle with a boss monster. You've got your achievers who are just trying to optimize damage and healing. You've got your explorers trying to see what happens if I climb the monster and stand on top of it, or if I get behind it, or are there any safe spots in the room where it can't hit you? And then there are the socializers taking time to type out something like, "Lord, I've been hit. The pain in my left arm is like no other wound I have ever experienced," and then describing everything that's happening in great detail. Those are socializers. Realistically, in many MMOs, the socializers wouldn't even necessarily leave town to get into a boss fight. They're perfectly fine staying there as level 1 characters, just talking to other people and role-playing and generally having fun. You see socializers in all kinds of games, by the way, not just MMOs. If you've ever played a tabletop game before with a group of friends, there's always that one person who's just playing to win, no matter how much of a jerk they are. That's the achiever. And then maybe you've got a player who keeps running into weird conditions and asking rules questions and clarifications. Oh, can I do this thing? What about that? What if I combine these things? How does the rules handle that? That's the explorer. And then there's the person who just is constantly chatting with everyone else and has to be constantly reminded to take their turn and shut up and play the game already. That's the socializer. It makes sense that MMOs would attract social people, since the whole differentiating element of these games is that there's lots of humans in one place. And actually, that's an appeal to achievers too, because if you want to demonstrate excellence at something, it's better to do it in front of a giant crowd. And it's also true for explorers. It's no good building maps and generating information about a game unless there are other people out there that can use that information and thank you for building it. The last type of player that Bartle identified, he called killers. These are the players who would go around attacking and killing other players in the game. Today we have a different term for these. We usually call them griefers. These are basically the players who are there to ruin someone else's day. The less fun someone else has because of your actions, the more fun you have. That's the killer mindset. Killers might attack other players. Achievers might also attack other players in order to demonstrate superiority, but the motivation between these two to harm other players is different. So achievers and killers might fight hard in places like a PvP arena, where the whole point is to kill other players in order to win a tournament. They'd be doing it for different reasons. Achievers are doing it to win. Killers are doing it to make you lose. Early MUDs and MMOs even sometimes had dedicated PK servers. That stood for player killing. These are servers was, in fact, acceptable for players to attack each other at any time once you left the safety of the city. And killer types would be the ones who would go to PK servers with level 50 characters, just standing outside the city walls of the very first city that people start in, waiting for a new level 1 player to come out, and then one-shot killing them and immediately taking all their stuff. That's kind of what killers did. So you can think of the 4 player types as being on a graph with these 2 axes, depending on whether you're more interested in the world itself or in other players, and also whether you're interacting with or exerting control over. So if you are taking actions on or against other players, that's a killer type. Interacting with other players is a socializer type. If you're interacting with the world, that's an explorer type. And if you're acting on the world and exerting influence on the world, that's an achiever type. You can see the influence of this in MMO design even today. Take a look at various character classes and mechanics in just about any contemporary MMO, and you'll probably see how many of them seem designed specifically to deal with one or more of these player types. For example, in World of Warcraft, players are either Alliance or Horde. You can only be in one of these 2 factions, and you can only speak in text to others in the same faction, but you can also only attack people from the opposing faction. Think about that in the context of the killer type. If a player's goal is to ruin someone else's fun, and keep in mind, killers aren't someone that you necessarily want in an MMO, it's just that MMOs do tend to attract these types of people. They're going to be there, so you need to deal with that. Right? So in the context of the killer type, you know these people are here, you know that they get fun from ruining other people's fun, you don't want that to get out of control. If a person's goal is to do that in World of Warcraft, you can attack them in the game, or you can abuse them in text chat, but because you can only do one or the other to someone depending on what faction they're in, you can only do one at a time, you cannot do both to the same person. So you cannot just go up to someone, kill them in the game, in the field, and then ridicule them in text chat. You can't do both. So this prevents killers from doing too much abuse to another player. As other examples, you could look at other different mechanics. Some character classes are support classes by nature. By definition, they aren't necessarily that strong on their own, but their goal is to boost other people that they're traveling with. So these support classes are strongest when traveling in a group. These are clearly made for socializer type players because it's kind of built into the class that you'll at least be with other people, and they'll probably be talking to you in some capacity, even if it's just as simple as begging you for heals and buffs. There are other classes that gain combat bonuses based on something like how much of the map you've revealed. That's clearly catering to the explorer player type by rewarding you for looking all over the place. So that's it. There are 4 kinds of players. Problem solved. Keep this in mind for every game you make, right? Well, no. As I said earlier, these are 4 player types for MMOs. So yes, if you happen to be building an MMO, you should probably be very familiar with Bartle's taxonomy. You should probably read a bit more in depth there. But what if you're making a game that isn't an MMO? What if you're making a platformer, or a first-person shooter, or a physics puzzle game, or a Adventure game. Are there other types of players that might not play a lot of MMOs, but they do play other types of games? The answer is yes. There are, in fact, more than 4 people in the world, more than 4 reasons why people play games. And again, remember, the Bartle taxonomy was just one guy's observations. It was a guess. A pretty good guess, one that's felt about right to other people who have worked in that space, but still an observation. Can we do better? For example, as long as we're dealing with unscientific, unvalidated lists, let's try putting Bartle's player types up against the MDA framework's 8 kinds of fun. Immediately, we can see some parallels here. There'd seem to be a one-to-one mapping between 3 of Bartle's player types and 3 kinds of fun. The ones that do not have direct parallels suggest that there might be other kinds of fun that could be derived from player types, or other player types that you could figure out from kinds of fun. For example, socializers often do heavy roleplay, but there's certainly a difference between the fun of playing make-believe and the fun of cooperating with friends toward a common goal, or the fun of just being around and playing with other players. So we might suggest that there's another player type in here specifically for make-believe that might have a lot of overlap with Bartle's socializer but is distinct, or that socializers maybe find a combination of several things fun, fellowship and fantasy. On the other side, killers don't seem to have a type of fun in the 8 kinds of fun, but we know they get their fun from griefing other players, so this suggests that griefing other players might be its own kind of fun. There might even be several types of fun relating to transgressive play, like the fun of bullying others, or the fun of breaking rules or cheating, which aren't listed in the MDA paper, but they probably should be. So I don't have any proof for this, but I do think there is a mapping between player types and kinds of fun. That these are strongly related, and that really what we're talking about is player types and their corresponding motivations of why they play. Our story continues with this company called Quantic Foundry, which decided to actually take a more scientific approach to this than what Bartle did. Their approach was pretty interesting. Started with a questionnaire that you can still take on their website that's basically like a BuzzFeed quiz. What kind of gamer are you? It asks you a bunch of questions about the kinds of things you'd encounter in games and how much you like or dislike them, and then it asks for a few of your personal favorite games, and then gives you a readout of where you score on each of these 12 areas here, and can even give you some game suggestions that you'd probably like because they were listed as favorites by people who have profiles similar to yours. So their survey is useful, in that it can give you game recommendations. It's kind of fun to take. You can find out what kind of gamer you are. And it was really easy for it to go viral on social media because, of course, they include a one-click option to share your profile on social media, which then posts your gamer motivation model and then asks your friends to take the quiz too. And as a result of this, they got a lot of data. Over 1 million people have filled out this survey to date, which in the survey world, 1 million responses is massive. So they are able to draw a lot of statistically significant conclusions from all that just by data mining. And I should point out, this is a for-profit company. They are doing this to make money. I'm not doing this to give them a commercial. Yeah, they have this big data pool. They can charge a lot of money for big game companies to look at. But they do have some very useful public-facing stuff like their player motivation model, which is what we see here. So what they found first off is that there are 12 basic motivations that are grouped into 6 general categories. First is the action category, which consists of both the motivation of blowing things up and general chaos, and also the motivation of fast-paced action, which is kind of like the sensation kind of fun from MDA. And while it might make intuitive sense that these things are related, this is in fact backed by data. Basically, each of these categories, they found a strong correlation with the other. That is, if you tend to like games that have a lot of excitement and high action in them, you probably also liked destruction. Most people had similar scores between these two things, which is why they put them in the same category. Not everyone, but a lot of people. Next is the social category, which kind of maps to the fellowship kind of fun, but we do see a surprise here that might be unintuitive, that competition and collaboration are actually closely related. The gamers who are extroverted are finding that playing in tournaments against other people and playing together cooperatively as a team, both are fun as long as they're just playing with other people and there's a social element to the play. Next up, we see challenge and strategy grouped together. Both of these map kind of to the challenge kind of fun from MDA, but in this model, there's a distinction between just doing things on hard difficulty like Souls-like games versus strategic thinking like in chess or Go. In the achievement grouping, this feels very much like Bartle's achiever player type, but it doesn't really have an analog in the MDA framework, suggesting these are new kinds of fun that MDA didn't discover. The first is the concept of completionism. Think of the people who aren't content with beating the game and getting the ending. They have to complete all the achievements and 100% the game. Pokemon was built for this player. I mean, its tagline is, gotta catch them all. Pokemon's tagline isn't, gotta catch some of them, or gotta catch a few of them, right? The creators of Pokemon knew exactly what they were doing when they said, gotta catch them all. And the other related motivation to that is power. That means maxing all your stats, getting the best equipment. So this is similar to the mastery category in that you're still trying to win the game, but it's different in that you're not necessarily trying to win by training your personal skill level to do superhuman feats in play. You're building up your virtual power in the form of stats and equipment so that you can win just by hitting the I win button. The next category looks at two related motivations, the fun of make-believe and the fun of enjoying a well-told story. So basically the fantasy and narrative types of fun from MDA. Remember when I said before those two seemed very closely related? Yeah, the science says I'm right. And the last category combines the MDA kinds of fun that they called expression and discovery. And they go even further in the model to find that there are actually three primary clusters of these. And that isn't to say that there are only three player types, just that there tend to be a lot of people in these three clusters. So there's the action social cluster, which we can think of as basically the appeal of esports. Then there's the mastery and achievement cluster, which is your typical strategy or RPG gamer. And the immersion creativity cluster, which you see a lot of in story-based games and tabletop role-playing, for example. So again, it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to be in one of these three types, just that there are a lot of people that, if they score high on the mastery section, they also tend to score high on achievement. When people like one, they tend to like the other. Not everyone, but enough of a correlation to be statistically significant. So now we have two separate but related concepts, player types and kinds of fun. The kinds of fun are really more like the motivations or reasons why those players play in the first place. And we know there's a map between these. There's some particular set of kinds of fun that's appealing to a lot of people, and we would cluster those people together and call them a player type. Or we could go the other direction. Say there's a type of player that we seem to observe a lot, maybe a set of players that all behave in a certain unique way in a game that's different from other players, and then we ask them all, what's the appeal of this type of play, and call that their motivation or their kind of fun. As designers, we might wonder, if we can flip back and forth between these, which one's more important? Should we just convert everything to kinds of fun or player types and ignore the other? So, on the one hand, player types are useful because we are making games for a target audience. If we, as designers, have some hypothetical kind of fun that no one actually finds fun in the real world, making a game to support that kind of fun won't really connect with very many people. A big part of making games is understanding who we make games for. And if you understand and have empathy for your target audience and what their motivations are to play, that makes it easier to craft an experience that will be appealing to them. For example, suppose you're making a Zelda-like adventure game where the core mechanic is discovering and exploring, right? The discovery type of fun or player motivation. And if you understand that some players like to explore and discover a world for its own sake, you won't just design a large world map for them to explore, you'd also put in mechanics to reward them for doing so. A perfect example of this would be the latest Zelda games on Switch, Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. In both games, you see a large open world to explore, but also just about every point of interest in that world has a secret to find. If you climb to the peak of pretty much any mountain, there's probably something up there. Maybe something small like a treasure chest or Korok seed, maybe something bigger like the entrance to a shrine or dungeon, or maybe when you reach that peak, it just gives you a really good view of the surrounding area that shows you about 6 other places that you should clearly explore. So just understanding that discovery is a motivation means putting in mechanics and content to reward that exploration and encourage players to engage with the map and environment itself so that players that like to explore will feel rewarded for doing so. But you can also go a step further than that. Understand that for every player that loves discovery, there's also a large correlation with players who love design and self-expression and customization, and also fantasy and narrative. So if you were designing a game like this, you might also consider some avatar customizability options. or put extra effort into world building and narrative so the player feels a narrative connection to the world they're exploring. Maybe it's not just climbing a mountain peak because that peak is there. Maybe it's a dragon's peak, and there's this whole subplot around how a dragon used to nest there, and its treasure is rumored to still be there that you found out from people in the town. Or maybe one of the main characters had a relative who lived near that peak and went missing, and you hear all about this interesting character and their exploits and the mystery of what happened to them, giving the player some anticipation of maybe meeting and rescuing them if they explore the area. So the reason for putting something like that story in the game isn't just to support the core mechanic of exploration, it can also be because you think it'll resonate with the target audience because you understand them as people. On the other hand, if you remember the MDA framework diagram, as designers, we are closer to the play experience, the aesthetics in the MDA sense, than we are to the player. We create the mechanics, which become dynamics, which, when the game is played, which are experienced as aesthetics, so it is easier for us to design the mechanics that will create a particular kind of fun than to design mechanics that will appeal to a specific player type. So in some ways, you could say it depends on the context. Sometimes it's easier to think in terms of player types, sometimes it's easier to think in terms of kinds of fun, and since we can go back and forth between those two, we can choose whichever one is the most appropriate or easiest to work with for this situation. So if you want to read more about this, the first things I'd point you to are Bartle's original paper on players in MUDs and the Quantic Foundry white paper for the things that we mentioned here. Since I mentioned we were talking about kinds of fun, there are other models out there. One that I've linked to here is Nicole Lazzaro's work on the nature of fun. The research section of her company's website is a giant rabbit hole of research into player motivations and kinds of fun, so that's a whole other universe to explore. I also put in here a link to a 2-part video series from the Extra Credits folks, specifically about Bartle's player types and how it's applied in actual game design. Worth watching to see how some of this heavy theory stuff about why people play and what they find fun can actually be used to make better games.
That's all for this video, so don't forget to take your assessment towards your certificate from HP Gaming Garage, and I'll see you in the next module.